The night I heard my husband laugh. Of course, this marriage is a joke. I'm just waiting for her mind to slip so I can lock her away and live off her money. I walked into the room, wiped the smile off his face, and handed him divorce papers I wasn't supposed to know he'd already drafted. He thought I was losing my mind. By the time I was done, he was the one in handcuffs, and his best friend was holding my hand in court. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. My name's Nora. I'm 63 years old, a grandmother of 3, and according to my soon-to-be ex-husband, I'm a soft old lady who can't even work a smartphone. Bless his heart. That line alone tells you how badly Lewis misjudged me. That night started like any other Thursday poker night. Lewis and his 3 buddies, Rob, Vince, and Mark, were in the dining room, beer bottles clinking, cigar smoke sneaking under the door like a nosy neighbor. I was in the kitchen making coffee, pretending not to listen. "Come on, Lou," Vince laughed. "You've got it made. House paid off, wife cooking for you, grandkids who adore you." Lewis snorted. "This marriage, it's a joke, man. I'm on chapter 2 of my life, and she's still stuck in black and white reruns." The men laughed. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles went white. "She's not even on my level," Lewis continued, dealing cards. "I give it a year, tops. Once her memory goes a little more, I'll have more than enough proof to get guardianship. Then it's bye-bye, Grandma. Hello, early retirement." "Guardianship?" Rob asked. "Like legal control of everything?" Lewis chuckled. "Exactly. Judge loves the confused spouse angle. I've been documenting everything. She puts her keys in the fridge one time, and I've got photos, dates, and witnesses." The men laughed again, softer this time. I set the coffee pot down and wiped my hands on my apron, the apron I suddenly hated. He thought my occasional "where did I put my glasses?" was a symptom. It was called being 63 and living with 3 grandchildren who borrow everything that isn't nailed down. I walked into that dining room as calmly as you please. "Coffee's ready, boys," I said, my voice sweet as the pecan pie cooling on the counter. "And so is something else." Lewis's smile froze. "Nora, we were just talking about how this marriage is a joke and you're counting down to my mental breakdown so you can lock me away and live off my money." Silence. Rob found his beer label very interesting, then suddenly started stacking poker chips like a toddler with blocks. Mark coughed and looked at the wall. "That's not... You're taking that out of context," Lewis stammered. I pulled the folded envelope from my pocket and placed it in the center of the table. "Context? It's funny that's the same word your lawyer used in his email when he sent you these." Lewis's face lost all its color. You hacked my email?" "No, sweetheart," I said, patting his shoulder. "You left your laptop open and you still use your dog's name as your password. If anyone here needs a competency evaluation, it's not me." I turned to his friends with a pleasant smile. "Gentlemen, since Lewis thinks this marriage won't last another year, I thought we could save him the wait. I agree with him, so I went ahead and had my attorney draft divorce papers." I slid the envelope toward Lewis. Why postpone the punchline? "Nora, we should discuss this privately." He reached for my wrist. I pulled back. "Privately? You weren't exactly whispering when you described your plan to have me declared incompetent, dear." Vince cleared his throat. Maybe we should bounce, Lou." "Oh, no," I said, stepping casually between them and the door. "Please stay. I'd hate for you to miss the part where Lewis learns just how soft and helpless his old wife really is." I leaned down, close enough to smell the whiskey on his breath. "You want guardianship, Lewis?" I whispered. "You're about to find out how dangerous it is to fight someone who keeps everything in writing." I picked up the coffee pot. "Have some coffee," I said, "and I'll be upstairs, texting my lawyer and changing all the passwords you think you control." As I climbed the stairs, Louis barked my name like I was a disobedient dog. I shut the bedroom door and locked it. My hands were shaking, but underneath the anger, there was something else. Relief. Because what Louis didn't know was that I already had more financial claws in him than he ever had in me. And in a few hours, his best friend would text me something that turned our little domestic war into a full-blown criminal case. It was almost midnight when my phone buzzed. Jake Miller. Now, Jake wasn't at poker night. He hadn't hung around with the Thursday crew in a while. But he and Louis had been best friends since high school, best man at our wedding, honorary uncle to our kids, the whole package. Jake. "Nora, I heard what happened tonight. We need to talk. It's about Louis. Coffee and Maine at 10 a.m. Please don't ignore this." If the "please" didn't get me, the fact that he never texted me directly did. I stared at the message, hearing Louis's laughter echoing downstairs, then typed back, 10 a.m. Don't be late. I barely slept. By morning, Louis was gone. He left a note on the kitchen table. "We both said things we didn't mean. Let's talk when you calm down. Don't do anything crazy." Crazy. Men love that word when a woman stops absorbing their nonsense. The coffee shop on Main looked like something out of a Hallmark movie. Fairy lights, plants, chalkboard menu, barista with tattoos and an undercut. Jake was already there, 2 mugs on the table. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his beard, worry lines carved deep around his mouth. "Nora," he said, standing up awkwardly, "you look good." "I feel dangerous," I replied, sitting. "What's so urgent?" He pushed one of the mugs toward me. "Still take it black with 1 sugar?" The fact that he remembered made me nervous. "Jake," I said, "I have a lawyer meeting at noon. If you have something to say, say it." He took a breath, ran his hair through his hair, same nervous habit he'd had at 22. "Last night, after you went upstairs, Louis lost it, kicked everyone out, then called me. He was furious about you hearing him, but more than that, he was scared." "Scared because he got caught plotting to stash me in a home while he spent my pension?" I said dryly. He winced. "Nora, what I'm about to tell you, I should have told you months ago." He pulled out his phone and scrolled, his hand shaking. "Louis didn't just say those things last night. He's been planning them for a long time, 18 months at least." I frowned. "Planning what exactly?" He hired a lawyer that specializes in guardianships and a private psychiatrist. He's been documenting every little mistake you make, every time you misplace something, every time you repeat yourself like there's symptoms of dementia. My stomach dropped. "He told me you were slipping," Jake continued quietly, "that you left the stove on twice, that you got lost coming home from the grocery store, that you gave the gardener a check for $1,000 instead of 100. That never happened," I said slowly. "I double-check every check I write." "I know that now, but he showed me evidence, photos, notes, even a video of you standing in the pantry looking confused. He turned my normal human forgetfulness into ammunition." Jake slid his phone across the table. "Read this." It was a text thread between him and Louis from 6 months back. Louis. "Question. Once I'm guardian, can I sell the house without her consent if I argue it's in her best interest? Travis. Yes, with court approval, provide evidence she's unsafe at home, suggest assisted living facility. Judges usually side with guardian." Louis. "Perfect.
Want it done before the market dips again." "He was planning to sell the house," I said slowly. "Put me in a home, sell the house, and live off the proceeds." Jake nodded grimly. "Nora," he said, "I mentioned you have a big secret nest egg you didn't tell him. An investment account?" My heart skipped. The account. The one I'd opened with a small inheritance from my parents, the one I'd grown from $45,000 into nearly $350,000 over the last decade, slowly and quietly, on a separate bank login that Lewis thought was just for my quilting club dues. "That money is mine," I said. "Every cent from my parents and my overtime shifts at the pharmacy." "I know," Jake said, "but Lewis thinks as your spouse, he can get control of it once you're declared incompetent. That's why he's rushing the guardianship before you get any crazy ideas about moving it." I laughed, a sharp little sound. "He thinks I'm too old to understand how online banking works, but he doesn't know I'm the one who taught our granddaughter how to code." Jake hesitated, then said, "There's one more thing." Of course there was. "He isn't just planning this," Jake said. "He's rehearsing for it. He's been telling people, your church friends, your bridge group, that you've been foggy lately, that he's worried you might wander off or forget the stove. He's building a community of people who will nod along when he says, 'See, everyone's noticed.'" I stared past Jake at the chalkboard menu, replaying conversations from the last few months. The pastor asking gently if I was getting enough rest, my neighbor offering to drive me to the store if traffic is too much, the bridge partner joking that I was dealing the wrong way again, Nora, you silly goose, except she'd said it 3 times in one night. They hadn't just been being kind, they'd been primed. I looked Jake dead in the eye. "Okay," I said, "here's what we're going to do." His eyebrows shot up. "We?" "You helped him dig the hole," I said calmly. "You're going to help me push him into it." Jake stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Tell me the plan, Grandma." And that's how my husband's best friend became my double agent. First thing I did after leaving the coffee shop was not cry in my car. I wanted to. Oh, did I want to. Instead, I drove straight to the bank. "Good morning, Mrs. Hartman," the teller said. "What can we do for you today?" "I'd like to transfer some funds," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "All of them, actually." Within an hour, my entire investment portfolio was moved from the local bank, where Lewis knew the manager by name, to a credit union across town, under a new account that required my fingerprint and a security phrase only my eldest granddaughter and I knew. The security phrase? Grandma doesn't forget. When I got home, Lewis's truck was in the driveway. He was pacing the living room, phone in his hand. "There you are," he snapped the moment I walked in. "You didn't answer my calls." "I was busy," I said, hanging up my coat. "Old ladies have appointments too, you know." He forced a chuckle. "Nora, about last night." "Which part?" I asked. "Calling our marriage a joke? Saying I'm beneath your level? Or outlining your plan to shove me in a care facility and steal my house?" He rubbed his temples like I was giving him a headache. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You've been so emotional lately." I was venting. The guys know I didn't mean it. "Do they?" I said mildly. "Because your dear friend Jake seemed to take it quite seriously." "Jake?" He stiffened. "You talked to Jake?" "I had coffee," I said. "He showed me some of your texts. You're quite the author, dear. Once I control the accounts, she can crochet in peace. I especially liked that line." He went pale, then red. "He had no right." "He had every right," I said. "You made him part of your scheme." He exhaled through his nose. "Nora, listen to yourself. Scheme? Guardianship is for your protection. You've been so forgetful. Name one concrete instance." One actual event where I endangered myself or others because of my cognitive decline. He opened his mouth, closed it. You left the oven on last month. That was you, reheating pizza. I turned it off when I smelled burning cardboard. You got lost driving to church. I took a different route to avoid construction. The service started on time, and I sang the alto harmony like I have every Sunday for 30 years. His eye twitched. You've been writing checks wrong. You wrote the landscaper a check for 700 instead of 70, I finished, and then immediately voided it and wrote a new one because I saw my own mistake. I stepped closer, close enough to see the bead of sweat forming at his hairline. Here's the thing, Louis, I said quietly. You wanted me to believe I was losing my mind, but you forgot one small detail. What's that? He muttered. I used to be a head nurse on a memory care unit. I spent 15 years charting real dementia. I know the difference between forgetfulness and disease, and so will any psychiatrist you drag into this. His jaw dropped just a fraction. He'd forgotten that part of my life, my career, before him. I'm fine. My neurologist says I'm sharper than he is. You've seen a neurologist? Louis choked. Last month, I said. I scheduled my own appointment after I noticed you asking people whether I seemed off. Full cognitive workup, passed with color so flying the nurse joked I could teach the test. I pulled a folder from my purse and tossed it on the coffee table. Those are my results, I said. Lo and behold, I am legally and medically competent. How inconvenient for you. His face went slack. I leaned down, lowering my voice. You want to play the crazy wife card in court? Make sure you flip it over first. You might find your own face on it. He started to reach for the folder, but I put my hand on it. I said. That stays with me for now. Wouldn't want you misplacing any pages. He swallowed. We can fix this, Louis. No lawyers, no drama, just counseling. Oh, I've had plenty of counseling. From my attorney. The attorney hit him like a slap. You hired one? He stammered. I smiled. Louis, darling, I hired an attorney 3 months ago when I saw the first screenshot of a calendar reminder on your phone titled, Dr. P, Talk About Nora's Decline. I weigh knit slowly, but I strategize fast. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it and quickly flipped it over, but not before I saw the name flash across the screen. Work for Coiled. Don't wait up, I said, grabbing my car keys. My attorney says I shouldn't sleep under the same roof as someone who's building a case to imprison me. I'll be at my sister's. You're overreacting, he shouted after me. Maybe, I said, opening the front door. But if I am, I'll write it down in detail. That's how this game works, isn't it? I left him standing in the doorway, clutching a guardianship plan that seemed flimsier than the thinning hair on his head.
Where are you watching from today? Drop your city and country in the comments while Grandma grabs another cup of tea. This part gets juicy. My sister lives 2 towns over in a small house with loud decor and louder opinions. When I showed up on her porch dragging a suitcase, she didn't ask questions. She just hugged me, then shoved a glass of Merlot into my hand. I knew that man was trouble when he called you the wife instead of my wife at your 40th anniversary party, she said. Sit, talk. By morning, I had 2 things, a headache and the contact info for a private investigator who'd helped a friend of hers bust a cheating husband. His name was Calvin Ortiz, ex-detective, mid-40s, and far too amused by my Operation Old Lady Strikes Back speech. If half of what you're saying is true, he said, tapping his pen against a legal pad, your husband is more than just a cheater. This is full-tilt financial abuse, maybe criminal. That's why you're here, I said. I can knit a sweater in 3 days and cook Thanksgiving dinner for 20, but I can't subpoena bank records. Calvin grinned. Don't worry, I can't knit. We all have our gifts. Over the next 2 weeks, while I rested at my sister's to clear my head, that's the story Lewis fed our friends, Calvin dug. He pulled Lewis's phone records, cross-checked bank statements, and even parked outside the house a few nights. By the time we met again in his cramped office above a tire shop, he had a folder so thick it looked like a phone book. "Well?" I asked, sitting. He opened the folder and laid out the first sheet, a neat chart of transfers from our joint account. "Your husband has been moving money, a lot of it. Same amount every month, 3,000 out of the joint account into an account solely in his name at Northwest First Bank." "I figured as much," I said. "That's the taxes and retirement he keeps talking about." Calvin shook his head. "Nope, he does have a small IRA, separate institution, different amounts. This account," he tapped the paper, "most of it goes 2 places, a brokerage account he set up in the last year, and rent payments." "Rent," I repeated slowly. "To a condo in the city," Calvin said. 2 bedrooms, lease signed by one Louis Hartman and one Melissa Crane." I raised an eyebrow. "So Melissa from work is Melissa from his secret apartment." "And she thinks you're long separated," Calvin added. "I had one of my female associates pose as a neighbor. Melissa said, and I quote, 'Louis is so noble, still paying for his sick ex to live alone while he waits for the courts to free him.'" "Sick ex," I said. "We're still married." "Not in the story he's telling her," Calvin replied. "In that version, you're a paranoid hoarder with early dementia who refuses treatment." I made a mental note to add storytelling to Lewis's list of useless talents. Calvin flipped to another document, an email thread between Lewis and a lawyer. "Here's your guardianship specialist," Calvin said. "Name's Charles Benton. You familiar?" I nodded grimly. "That's the name on the emails I saw." "He's advising Lewis on how to gather evidence, suggesting he get statements from friends, doctor's notes, even video. They've got a plan. Lewis creates a picture of you as confused and erratic. Charles files for emergency guardianship. Judge freezes your accounts to protect you, then appoints Lewis as your conservator." "How long would that take?" I asked. "In best case for them," Calvin said, "a few weeks, maybe less if a sympathetic judge bites on the emergency angle." "So I have a few weeks," I said slowly, "to turn their emergency into a disaster for them." Calvin smiled. "That's where the rest comes in," Calvin said. He spread more pages out on the desk, screenshots of a second email account of Lewis's, one he'd made with his middle name and a different provider. This is where he talks freely, to Melissa, to Benton, sometimes to his poker buddies. It's also where he keeps a neat little document called Timeline N. N for Nora, I guessed. Calvin nodded. "He dates every perceived episode of yours. 3/12. Nora asks what day trash pickup is, even though it's Tuesday, like always. Stuff like that." I snorted. He forgot the part where he changed the pickup day last year when they reworked the route. "Oh, it gets better," Calvin said. "He literally writes, 'Might be able to frame this as dangerous. Nora almost tripped on top stair,' as if being clumsy is a diagnosable condition." Calvin handed me one last item, a USB drive. "What's that?" I asked. "Backups of everything, in case Lewis decides to accidentally spill coffee on his laptop." I turned it over my fingers. "Calvin, what's my best move here?" He leaned back. "Option 1, we go nuclear now. Take all this to a good family lawyer, file a divorce, file a protective order, and show him he's been stealing and lying in. Guardianship petition never sees daylight." "And the other option?" I asked. He hesitated. "Option 2 is riskier, but if it works, it could take him down harder.
You let him file, let him think his plan is working. Meanwhile, we gather more evidence, recordings of him coaching witnesses, proof he's feeding lies to your doctor and employer. Then at the hearing, your lawyer drops the entire file on the judge's bench and asks her if she enjoys crime dramas. I smiled slowly. Option 2, I said. Definitely option 2. Are you sure? Calvin asked. It means pretending to be more vulnerable than you are, playing into his narrative, just enough to let him feel confident. Son, I said, reaching for my bag, I've spent 40 years letting men underestimate me. It's about time I use that to my advantage.
For the next 2 weeks, I played the role of confused old lady so well I could have won an Oscar. At church, I forgot a hymn verse and chuckled about my silly brain. At the grocery store, I asked the clerk to remind me which cart was credit and which was debit. All of it with people I knew Lewis would eventually talk to. All of it while Calvin quietly collected the other half of the puzzle. Proof that Lewis was manipulating every single one of those moments to build his case. Meanwhile, Jake kept me updated. He's ecstatic, says the judge will eat this up. He actually practiced a sad face in the mirror. Record everything. Think of it as a podcast called Idiot Platt's Own Downfall. Jake started carrying his phone everywhere, recording all his conversations with Lewis for his own protection, which was technically true. Some of the recordings were almost funny, if you could ignore the part where my own husband was trying to disappear me. Remember to say she's been talking about getting her affairs in order, Lewis instructed on one recording. Judges love that phrase, makes them think suicide risk. That's pretty dark, man, Jake had replied. It's called strategy, Lewis said. Once she's under evaluation, she can't move money. Melissa and I just need a few months to set everything up. He said all that while I was at my sister's playing Go Fish with my 8-year-old grandson. At my neurologist's suggestion, I'd started keeping a daily journal. I wrote down everything, where I was, who I spoke to, what time it was, what we discussed. It was tedious, but it also built a timeline that would eventually clash beautifully with Lewis's fake one. Another little twist for you. 2 days after I left, Lewis called my principal at the elementary school. Dr. Patel called me personally. Nora, she said, your husband phoned. He said you'd been very forgetful, that you might need time off. I bet he did, I replied. Dr. Patel, might I ask you a favor? If he calls again, would you make notes of exactly what he says and when? Date, time, and his exact words. Of course, she said. Is everything all right? It will be, I answered. I can't explain yet, but I will. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location below and tell me, have you ever had someone try to convince you you're crazier than they are? Because that is an experience. It happened on a Tuesday. Calvin called at 8 a.m. He filed, he said, emergency guardianship. I'm looking at the docket now. Hearing set for Friday at 9. My heart sped up, not with fear, but with adrenaline of finally reaching the third act. What did he claim? I asked calmly. That you're missing, suicidal, and possibly giving away money, Calvin replied. He submitted affidavits from 2 church members, your neighbor, and your family doctor, all of them describing you as increasingly confused and emotionally unstable. Doctor? I repeated sharply. Your family doctor, he said, Dr. Hughes. He submitted notes from your dizziness visit last year and a letter Lewis asked him to write about his concerns. Well, that called for a phone call. I dialed Dr. Hughes from the kitchen table at my sister's. Nora, are you all right? He answered, sounding flustered. I am now, I said. Doctor, I have a question.
When Louis asked you to write that letter about my confusion, did he tell you I'd had a full neuro workup elsewhere?" There was a pause. "No," Dr. Hughes admitted. "He said he was worried about mild cognitive impairment. I trusted his description. He neglected to mention that the neurologist said my brain is functioning beautifully," I replied. "Doctor, I respect you, which is why I'm telling you this. My husband is using you as part of a scheme to take over my finances. My lawyer will be in touch. For your sake, I hope you kept copies of everything he asked you to sign." "Oh, dear Lord," he whispered. "Nora, I'm so sorry." "It's not apology time yet. It's documentation time. Start a file. You'll need it." By lunchtime, I was in the office of my attorney, Marisol Vega, a tiny woman with steel in her spine and case law in her head. She slid the guardianship petition across her desk. "Classic," she said. "Seen this play before. Older spouse painted as incompetent, younger or more ambitious spouse swoops in as protector and conveniently gets access to all the money." "Can we stop it?" I asked. She smiled. "We're not just going to stop it, Mrs. Hartman. We're going to set it on fire and roast marshmallows over the remains." Marisol filed a response that afternoon. Opposition to guardianship, request for immediate protective order against Louis, and an attached binder of evidence Calvin had compiled. Phone logs, email threads, screenshots of Louis's Timeline N, copies of my neurologist's report, Dr. Patel's notes about Louis trying to smear my reputation at work, and best of all, Jake's recordings. "I'm also attaching a cross petition," Marisol said, "for divorce, fraud, and financial abuse." "Can we do that all at once?" I asked. "Oh, absolutely. You know how in movies they object dramatically? I'm about to do that with your entire life story." Friday morning, the courthouse smelled like disinfectant and nerves. Louis arrived early wearing his concerned husband face and a navy suit I'd bought him 10 years ago. Melissa was there too, sitting in the second row, eyes wide and shiny. She wore a conservative blazer instead of the sparkly tops I'd seen in Calvin's surveillance photos. She thought she was here to support a loving man trying to save his poor, confused wife. Bless her, she had no idea. When I walked in with Marisol, there was a subtle ripple through the courtroom. Louis did a double take. For a man who claimed I was missing, he sure looked shocked to see me. He hurried up, performing for the judge already on the bench. "Your Honor," he said, "I'm so relieved." "Sit down, Mr. Hartman," Judge Alvarez said coolly. "You'll have plenty of time to talk." "Your Honor," Marisol announced, "Marisol Vega for Nora Hartman in opposition to the petition and in support of our cross motions filed yesterday." The judge looked surprised. "It appears Mrs. Hartman is not missing after all." "Quite present, Your Honor," Marisol said, "and very interested in clearing her name." The judge opened the thick file in front of her. "Mr. Hartman," she said, "your petition states that your wife has been missing for a week, is mentally unstable, and has threatened self-harm. Do you stand by those statements under oath?" Louis glanced at his attorney, then nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm terrified for her. She's been confused, impulsive, and talking about ending it all." Marisol rose. "Your Honor, may I cross-examine?" "Proceed," the judge said. "Mr. Hartman," Marisol began, "when you told the court my client was missing, did you also tell them you spoke with her by phone 2 days ago?" Louis blinked. I haven't spoken to her and—" Marisol pressed a button on a little device on the table. Jake's recording filled the courtroom. Louis's voice, "Nora, you're being paranoid. You need help. Let me come get you." My voice, I'm safe and staying with family. I just don't want to live with a man planning to put me in a home. Lewis, you're not thinking clearly. The judge raised an eyebrow. That call was 3 days ago, Mr. Hartman. Still want to claim she was missing? Lewis's lawyer sputtered. There must be context. Oh, there's context. Hours of it. One by one, she played short clips, Lewis coaching Jake on what to say about my suicidal comments, Lewis instructing his friends to emphasize my confusion if they were ever called, Lewis laughing about how judges eat this stuff up, especially with women over 60. Mr. Hartman, Marisol said, once the last clips ended, is that your voice on these recordings? He swallowed. It sounds like me, but yes or no? Yes. Thank you. Let's move on. She handed the judge a folder. Exhibit 12, Your Honor, neurologist report by Dr. Ellman, conducted 6 weeks ago, showing Mrs. Hartman has no cognitive impairment, full memory, and function within normal range. Mr. Hartman, did you know your wife saw a neurologist? Lewis looked caught. She mentioned doctor, but you chose not to share that report with this court. Instead, you submitted a letter from her family doctor suggesting possible mild impairment, a letter you requested. Did you tell Dr. Hughes about this neurologist's assessment? He didn't answer. Let the record reflect that Mr. Hartman is silent, Marisol said sweetly. Now about the money. For the next 20 minutes, she took him through every shady transfer Calvin had found. $3,000 a month from the joint account to your personal account, another $2,000 from that account to a brokerage, and rent payments for a condo shared with Miss Melissa Crane. Did your wife consent to her marital funds supporting your secret residence with your girlfriend? Melissa gasped. Clearly, she hadn't gotten all the memos either. Nora is confused about our finances, Lewis started. But who is not? Marisol interrupted. The bank. And they've provided records showing you've been siphoning funds for a year and a half. That's not retirement savings. That's misappropriation. She saved the best for last. Your Honor, she said, we submit Exhibit 20, copies of emails between Mr. Hartman and attorney Charles Benton about timing the guardianship so he can sell the marital home and put Nora somewhere safe before the market dips. The judge's expression hardened with each page she scanned. Mr. Hartman, Judge Alvarez said slowly, this petition is based on misrepresentations to the court, selective medical evidence, and frankly, manipulation of your community. I am not only denying your request for guardianship, I am issuing a protective order in favor of your wife and referring your case to the district attorney for review of potential fraud and elder abuse charges. Lewis swayed like someone had yanked the rug out from under him. This is ridiculous. She's losing it. Nora, the judge said, turning to me, I've read your neurologist's reports and your journal. I've listened to these recordings. You are not the problem here. For the first time in weeks, my eyes burned. Thank you, Your Honor, I managed. As for the divorce, she continued, I'm assigning this to the family docket. Given the evidence, I'm inclined to grant Mrs. Hartman exclusive control over her accounts pending settlement and award temporary sole use of the home. Mr. Hartman, you will evacuate the property within 72 hours. You could have heard a poker chip drop. Jake caught my eye from the gallery and mouthed, Told you he was the joke.
You'd think the story ends there, right? Oh, honey, we're not even at the dessert course. 2 days after the hearing, Calvin called. You're going to get a message, he said, from someone named Melissa. I didn't have to wait long. Melissa, Mrs. Hartman, my name is Melissa Crane. I think we need to talk. I've been lied to, and you deserve to know how. We met in the most neutral territory I could think of, the Botanical Gardens Cafe. Hard to yell in a room full of orchids and toddlers. Melissa was younger than I expected, early 30s at most, with tired eyes and a cardigan she kept wrapping around herself like armor. I thought about not coming, she admitted, sitting down. I figured you'd hate me. I don't have time to waste on hating you, I said. "Lewis has used up my entire hate budget for the year." She gave a shaky laugh. "He told me you were sick," he said, "that you'd wandered off. That's why he was so desperate to get guardianship. He made it sound like a mercy. That man could make drowning kittens sound like charity if there was money in it," I replied. She winced. "I believed him. I shouldn't have. I see that now." Melissa slid a thick manila envelope across the table. "I went back to the condo," she said. "I packed my things, and then I found this in the lockbox he keeps in the closet. File name, Project N." Project N. I thought Calvin was joking when he'd used that phrase. Apparently not. Inside were printed pages, timelines, email drafts, even scripts. "He wrote out what he planned to say to the doctors," she said, pointing. "How he'd describe your episodes, how he'd act distraught and overwhelmed. There's even a section on how to cry without actually crying." I flipped through the pages, stomach turning. There were lists of things I'd actually done, like repeating a story on a barbecue, and long, creative embellishments where he turned those moments into evidence of spiraling confusion. At the back was a letter he'd drafted but never sent, presumably to his guardianship lawyer. "Once Nora has been placed in memory care, what's the timeline before I can relocate out of state? Melissa and I have been looking at condos in Arizona. Also, can I restrict visitation so I'm not obligated to see Nora often? I don't think it will be good for my mental health." He was planning to lock me away and then flee to the sun with my money. "But that's not the worst thing," Melissa whispered. "Look at the sticky note." Tucked inside the folder was a small yellow note in Lewis's handwriting. "Reminds Goth about her mixing pills incident. Stress possible overdose risk. He told me you tried to take too many sleeping pills once, that he'd found you just in time." "That never happened," I said. "Not even close." "I know that now," she said. "I called your doctor. He said the only pill mistake on record was you accidentally taking your blood pressure medication twice." "That happened once," I admitted, "and I called the pharmacy immediately and had them pay an doctor. I said in the ER just to be safe. Blood pressure was low for a bit. That's all." "He turned that into an attempt," she said faintly. "In his notes, he writes like he's narrating a tragedy where he gets to be the hero." For a moment, we just sat there, two women who'd been living in stories Lewis wrote without our consent. "What are you going to do?" I asked her. "I already did it," she said. "I went to the DA's office this morning, gave them copies of everything in that folder. They said it helps their case." She hesitated. "I also gave them copies of the times he mentioned creative accounting for his job." "Creative accounting?" My eyebrows rose. "Creative what now?" "Lewis always joked that he moved money around at work to make the numbers look better for his boss," she said. "I thought he was just bragging, but some of those emails sounded not legal. The man hadn't just tried to defraud me. He'd apparently been playing games with his employer's clients, too." "Honey," I said, laying a hand over hers, "you may have just saved more people than you know." Melissa wiped her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Hartman. If I'd known—" "If you'd known, you wouldn't have gone near him. That's how men like Lewis operate. They pick people who trust easily. Then they make trusting look like a weakness." She nodded. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Why are you being kind to me? If I were you, I'd see me as part of the problem." "You were part of the plan, not the problem. There's a difference." I stood, tucking the folder into my bag. "And I'm a grandmother," I added with a small smile. "We specialize in second chances." Fast forward 6 months. The headline in the local paper read, "Local man sentenced for financial abuse and fraud in guardianship scheme." Lewis took a plea deal. 5 years in prison plus restitution, plus barred from serving as guardian or fiduciary for anyone ever again. His creative accounting at work turned out to be embezzlement light. His employer pressed charges. That tacked on another year.
Charles Benton, the guardianship lawyer, lost his license when the bar discovered he'd helped 3 other husbands pull similar stunts with less evidence. Funny how one determined grandma with a good PI can unravel an entire rotten little industry. As for me, I kept the house. The judge decided I'd paid more into it over the years and that Lewis had tried to steal it. That made the division easier. The investment account stayed mine, every penny. Jake stayed by me through every hearing, every thick envelope of legalese. Every night I worried I'd forget something important and make myself look like the crazy person Lewis said I was. He also brought me flowers once a week for court days, which is a habit I recommend everyone adopt, lawsuit or not. Where are you watching from today? Tell me in the comments if your grandma has ever out-schemed someone twice her size, because that's my favorite part of this story. It isn't just that I won in court, it's that I discovered I was never the soft, helpless old thing Lewis thought he could shove into a corner. I was the one with the receipts, the one who knew where every penny went, the one who remembered every little slight he thought I'd forgotten. And the best part? I started using all that experience to help other people. A few months after the trial, the County Senior Center invited me to speak. Just a little talk on financial safety, the director said. Nothing fancy. I made some notes, printed a few charts, practiced in front of the mirror. 70 people showed up. By the time I finished telling them how guardianship abuse works, how to keep independent records, and how to make sure every doctor visit includes your side of the story, we had a waiting list for one-on-one appointments. So we started a program. We call it Not Losing It, as in our minds and our money. Jake helped build the website. Calvin volunteered to run quarterly fraud workshops. Marisol sent us clients who needed support beyond court. Even Melissa came once to tell her side, from the other woman's perspective, about how easily someone can be pulled into an abuser's orbit without realizing they're being used to harm someone else. The local news did a segment. I had to laugh. There I was on TV, a gray-haired woman in a cardigan, talking about shell companies and power of attorney abuse like I was narrating a cooking show. My granddaughter Becca watched from the couch and said, "Grandma, you're low-key scary." "Good," I replied. "Scary grandmas keep families safe." One night, after a meeting at the center, Jake walked me to my car. "You know," he said, shoving his hands in his pockets, "you could have disappeared after all this. Moved somewhere sunny, spent your days knitting on a porch swing." I tried knitting on a porch swing. My back hurt and the neighbor's dog kept drooling on my yarn. This is more fun. He laughed. "I'm glad you didn't disappear," he said quietly. "So am I admitted. We stood there for a moment, the air cool, the parking lot almost empty. "Jake," I said, "you were part of the problem once." "I know," he said immediately. "I watched Lewis run his mouth and I stayed quiet. I'll be sorry for that until I die." "And then," I continued, "you became part of the solution. You listened when I finally spoke. You recorded what he wanted you to lie about. You took the stand. You believed me when it mattered." He swallowed. "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to stay in that second category." "Good," I said, "because I don't plan on doing this advocacy thing alone." We started walking again. "Jake," I added. "Yeah? When I finally go on that trip to Prague I keep talking about, bring your passport." He smiled, wide and boyish. "Yes, ma'am." So here's the moral, darlings, since every good grandma story needs one. My husband said our marriage was a joke. He called me outdated, beneath him, and almost expired. He thought getting older meant getting weaker, softer, easier to control. He thought he could rewrite my story, convince the world I was losing my mind so he could take everything I'd spent my life building.
Instead, everything he documented became the evidence that buried him. He tried to make me disappear. I started a movement instead. So if someone ever rolls their eyes at you and says you're too old, too emotional, or not on their level, remember this: grandmothers don't expire. We age like sourdough and pickles. We ferment. We get stronger, sharper, a lot harder to swallow. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you've got a story about a time someone underestimated you, share it in the comments. Your voice, and especially your memory, matters.